The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is October 1st, 2018. Episode 656, I believe. I'll have that figured out by the time I upload this. Definitely my second podcast in the last 12 hours, I would imagine, or last 16 hours. I probably will schedule this. You will probably get this late this afternoon because I want to make sure that you have had time to consume the episode from yesterday, which was Sunday, dealing with a farewell to ignorance and a bidding adieu to the dumb left, for very specific reasons that I think you should hear and consider for yourselves why it is completely unproductive for us to engage with a portion of the left that insists on living in 2018, living underneath this new paradigm in 2018 as though they are still in 2016. And that's just like the very reductionist definition or reductionist explanation as to why I think we should bid farewell to the dumb left, and why we call them the dumb left, which is not just to be a funny, pejorative, fun way of insulting someone, but because their actions actually detract from their goals. It's madness when what you are saying you want to accomplish, what you are doing is actually exacerbating the problem. And you feel as though what you're doing is actually the brilliant, intellectual, and true progressive thing to do. That's madness. That's dumb. But that was yesterday's episode. And the reason these episodes are coming back to back so quickly is because, I guess when something gets on my mind, it really locks in. And this is my way. This is my moment of catharsis to get this out. Today's episode. Yesterday, I realized just how uninformed the left, some of the left, the social media left, because I want to be clear. Like there are people who are progressives, who are socialists, who are communists, who are so clear about these things, and they understand these words that they use. So what I'm getting ready to say is not a slam on the blanket left, right? On the left, throwing a blanket net across all the left and saying no. What I'm saying is there are so many people on the social media left that don't know what neoliberalism really is, that it's shocking. And the reason this matters is because, as I said in yesterday's podcast, if you are really here to fight neoliberals, then it is entirely impossible for you to ignore the Republican Party, who were the first neoliberals in this country and currently represent the most perverse version of neoliberalism that the world has ever seen, and currently implementing policies of neoliberalism that will make democratic neoliberals look like communists. Now, that last sentence was a little bit of hyperbole, but when you consider the economic policies of Donald Trump, particularly the tax breaks, his tax breaks are going to make Ronald Reagan's 1981 Roth-Kemp tax cuts look like a walk in the park. And the 1981 tax cuts is what initiated the fiscal policy of neoliberalism in the United States. This is a matter of historical fact. Neoliberalism first came to the United States 1981 in terms of fiscal policy. It started in 1979 with Paul Volcker in terms of monetary policy, which, just know those dates and know those differences, right? Or you could look it up and dig into it for yourself. But just historically speaking, that's the beginning of neoliberalism in the United States. Bill Clinton continued that tradition Because you have to understand, Bill Clinton came to his political maturation during the time of Ronald Reagan. And so what happened with Ronald Reagan is he created a brand new consensus that became just the expectation or the new normal, where it just seemed common sense that the government is the problem. And if we get the government out the way, then we could let loose the free markets on society. I mean, listen to that language. That is the language of neoliberalism. And that is the language of just about every politician in Washington, D.C., save a few Democrats. That is the language of, and actually, I want to be now in 2018, whatever year this is, it really is the language of fewer and fewer and fewer Democrats, because we are successfully pushing them further back to the left. But it's important to understand the term, what it means, and why it's important to hold it to its original meaning, or at least in terms of American politics, because this is neoliberalism is not new. It did not start in the United States, but it started in the United States in 1981 as a matter of fiscal policy. Now, before that, the consensus in Washington, D.C., with regards to the economy, was Keynesianism, Keynesian economics, John Maynard Keynes. And the consensus before that was a focus on demand, saying it in as simple terms as I could put it, basically saying that your economic output depends on demand. And demand really, and this is critical, right? This is not just throwing around economic terms, economics 101 terms, but demand, if you think about it in terms of our society, demand literally means you and I, you and me, all of us, those of us who demand products, those of us who consume. So demand, when you create fiscal policies that focus on, cultivating the strongest demand possible, then you are creating fiscal policies and monetary policies, mind you. Monetary policies being the moves that the Fed makes with regard to interest rates. But you're focusing on economic policies in general that insist on cultivating and focusing on the strength of consumers. Now, that is like the simplest way of defining Keynesian economic theory. They're literally books, thousands of pages of books, and probably millions of pages of scholarly journal articles that can get into the complexities of it. But at the end of the day, it is about demand. Neoliberalism, and I think people have separated this. You understand the opposition to demand side economics. You understand it as supply side economics. Another word for supply side economics is trickle down economics. Some variations in those terms, but I think we're safe if we use those terms interchangeably. Supply side economics, and trickle down economic theory. Both of those represent a focus on basically capitalists, people who create the supply, doing everything that you can to stimulate supply and getting the government out of the way, particularly in terms of regulation, in terms of any interference in the market, ostensibly, because that's arguable. But the point is that you have two competing paradigms that lasted for decades. Ronald Reagan represented the change in the paradigm in which we had some of the most significant growth in this country, growth both for the capitalist as well as the consumer. And he reversed it to focus all of the power of the federal government onto helping producers. And by producers, I mean capitalists. Now, to finish the sentence that I actually started was, this already. You understand supply side economics. Most people understand trickle down economics, basically giving everything to the wealthy and expecting that it's going to distribute itself reasonably and fairly. We've known for the last 30 years that this is wrong. But these two terms, really, this is what neoliberalism is. The economic policies of Ronald Reagan were neoliberal. Now, I've said the terms, and actually, I want to give you a good definition of it so we can just have it settled. But before I give the definition of it, here's why the definition matters so much and why it being used in the United States the way it is incomplete to the point of being a misnomer. If you base your entire political participation on fighting against neoliberalism, and you don't understand that neoliberalism was brought to the United States by Republicans, and the most perverse form of neoliberalism actually comes from Republicans currently, then what are you fighting? If you truncate, I said this last night on the podcast as well as on Twitter, but if you sever from your understanding of neoliberalism, Republican economic policy, what the hell are you fighting? If you reduce neoliberalism down to just people who you think are corporate, quote unquote, corporate shills, then what are you actually fighting? Because the most perverse version of what you hate is literally in power right now. But as I said last night, and I have to reiterate, by doing that, you've created a way for you to constantly attack Democrats for what Republicans are doing. And that's why it is dumb. That's why you're the dumb left. Because you claim to be, and now, but actually I'm going to take the pejorative off the table. You're misinformed. And this is the fault of, particularly for social media leftists and progressives, this is the fault of social media leftist influencers. Now, I've made this distinction so many times on my show, but I'm thinking I made those distinctions really, really early on when I didn't have a significant audience. So maybe it's just time to make these distinctions again. Republicans are neoliberals. Do not let the suffix liberal fool you. It is liberal in the international sense. And the amount of willful ignorance around this are gleeful ignorance is staggering. The best example of it last night was, actually, I'm not even going to get into that. I want to stay focused on this. By not understanding what neoliberalism actually is, what you can't understand what you're fighting against. And you're going to be fighting the specter of neoliberalism when in actuality, the monster, the real bastardization of neoliberalism on cocaine and steroids mixed with a little speed is in power right now. Here's a good way to understand it. And I got this from Brennan Sutton, brilliant guy. And we should get back with Noah and do politics and grits again. But here's a good way of understanding it. I mean, this is not Brandon's idea. This is just in general. You could reduce, if you need a shorthand for neoliberalism, think capitalism. Think laissez-faire capitalism. Think unregulated capitalism. And if you think that, then you will start seeing that there are actually differences, economic differences between Republicans and Democrats, and not enough differences. And we can all agree there. That's why we call them Republican light. And this is where Brandon Sutton's comment actually comes and is very helpful. Democrats want to moderate the excesses of capitalism. And by that, he means Democrats want some reasonable regulations to not allow the extreme and perverse excesses of capitalism to run amok, to not unleash the kraken of true laissez-faire capitalism and what it would do to society, particularly the masses that make the entire system work. Democrats want to moderate those excesses, where Republicans want all of it and then some. But it's still within the same framework that was brought to the United States in 1981. Well, actually, that's a little, that might not be complete. It was brought back to the United States in 1981. We had quite the bit of the attempt to get towards laissez-faire capitalism leading up to the Gilded Age, or in the Gilded Age, leading up to the Great Depression, which was actually the cause of the Great Depression. But now we have fancy tools to see what's coming and to buy our way out of depressions. But I digress. So 1981, it wasn't accurate for me to say that it came to the United States in 1981. The new version of it, the neo version of it, came to the United States in 1981. This is like what I'm telling you is the academic definition of these words in very reduced, simplified terms. I mean, if you want to see the academic definition of these words, you actually have to break out some supply and demand charts. But the reason this is important, and I haven't even gotten to the definition of it yet, but the reason this is so important, I have to reiterate this. If you don't understand what it is, then how the hell can you fight it? And if you don't understand what neoliberalism actually is, and you don't understand the Republicans are neoliberals in the extreme sense, then what are you doing? What are you even doing? What are you doing? You're just railing against some Democrats who are closer to you in terms of trying to at least moderate the excesses. Now, perhaps you're so far from them in the sense that you want to just destroy the entire system, bring the entire system down. That you can make I can make the argument for that. I can make the case for that. I can make the economic case for that, right? You know, we can all make that case, but at the same time, you're dealing with Republicans who represent, they are the antithesis of everything you stand for and claim to fight against economically, or fight for economically, as if they're the antithesis. But you get what I'm saying. And I'm being redundant, and I'm driving this point home over and over and over again, because I need you to see how ridiculous it is to have people online all day long screaming about neoliberalism, accusing people of being neoliberals, and they don't themselves even have the full, complete definition of it. Now, some people are just clueless. Some people are just clueless, and this is not a fault of your own. I mean, I guess you could have done your own research, but if you're listening to all of these countless hours of podcasts talking about neoliberalism, and none of them point out the fact to you that Republicans are the greatest examples of neoliberals in power today, then my God, they have done you a disservice, and I hope you're not paying them. And before I even get to the definition, again, I know I'm like way, down into it's taken me a long time to get to that, but I want to go back to the guy who tweeted to me, and he gave me and explain why his definition, which was Republican economic policies minus Republican insane social policies. Why that is incomplete, and not just incomplete in terms of what he said in that sentence. That sentence is not incomplete by itself, except it doesn't point out the fact that Republicans are neoliberals, right? That's where it's incomplete. But conceptually, if you need to understand what neoliberals are in the Democratic Party, his tweet was fine. Where he's wrong was his application of the word towards me and this is important, not because of me, but because this is how the word is used on social media, to the point of people redefining the word without any understanding what the word actually meant. And this matters not as a way of just controlling language. Who cares about how terms evolve over time? It's perfectly fine for language to evolve and words to have different meaning. But when you when you get into this thing, and here's the main point. I think I've said it 5 times. I'm going to say it a 6th time. When you get into this thing to oppose a particular set of policies that you believe, and factually so, have eviscerated the working class and some of the lower middle class, but particularly the working class. You got into this to oppose those very specific economic policies. When you have redefined the term, and by redefine, I mean you use it to the point where it no longer includes the biggest culprits of those policies, then what the hell are you doing? I mean, who are you fighting? What are you're honestly just saying that you're angry at Democrats. You're not in this to actually oppose those policies anymore. Because if you're in this to oppose those very specific set of economic policies, which you believe, and rightfully so, have eviscerated the working class and some of the middle class, then, and no, I'm sorry, I have to be more inclusive, in a lot of the middle class. So much so that we've had to redefine the middle class, right? But then if you're not including the main culprits of this, people, what are you doing? You're not doing anything. You're not doing anything but slinging a word around basically to mean anybody that you don't like that day, or anyone who doesn't listen to Jimmy Dore, or anyone who doesn't oppose people who you think they should oppose. Because I tell you what, this is how you evaluate if someone is a neoliberal. Are they encouraging economic policies similar to Ronald Reagan? Period. We can talk about foreign policy. We can talk about social policy. But in terms of the economic definition of neoliberalism, which is the most important thing to understand, because that is the world that we're living in. It is so pervasive. It is so ubiquitous. Everything that we are involved in right now has been shaped by Ronald Reagan. And so when conservatives actually say that Donald Trump is going to be the most consequential and most significant conservative president in modern history, they're not wrong. They're actually right, because Donald Trump's economic policies are ushering us into an even more perverse version of Ronald Reagan's economic paradigm. We are going to have about a 30 to 40 year of experience with Donald Trump's economy. Similar to that of foreign policy, the neoconservative and oh God, people don't understand. People take the suffix and just leave it there and believe that that's how it should be applied in terms of your understanding. But when I say neoconservative, that really has roots in foreign policy. And you understand George Bush to be one of the worst examples of a neoconservative we have in modern history. His moves make him the most consequential president in terms of foreign policy for at least a generation, if not more, because he has created the world that we live in with his decisions to invade Iraq, to attack Afghanistan, and those wars are still going on. He has shaped the foreign policy of the next generation. He is the most consequential foreign policy president. That's why he should never be rehabilitated. But you have entire paradigms that are instituted by presidents. Ronald Reagan instituted neoliberalism in the United States. Donald Trump is instituting a more perverse version of neoliberalism in the United States. And we're going to be living with it unless we get in power and completely reverse everything that this man has done. We will be living with it for, hell, it's been 40 years almost since Ronald Reagan became president. And this is why it's so frustrating when people look at Donald Trump and think, oh, we don't need to focus on Donald Trump because we need to focus on the Democrats. And I'm sitting back and saying, we're going to be dealing with this for 40 years, my people, or more. Because I stammered a second ago because I realized that, I haven't even talked about the judiciary and his reshaping of the judiciary in the United States. So to not focus on that is progressive malpractice and represents a fundamental a misunderstanding, a lack of knowledge, intentional or otherwise. Because everything that you say that you oppose is represented the worst by Republicans and being implemented right before your eyes by Republicans. And fine, maybe, the resistance has it under control. Yeah, but the resistance isn't capable of doing it the right way. Progressives should be leading the charge in opposition to Donald Trump, because if we don't lead the charge in opposition to Donald Trump, you are going to get actual neoliberal Democrats who don't see anything wrong with deregulation. They don't see anything wrong with austerity. They don't see anything wrong with the meritocratic lie of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. They don't see anything wrong. I'm giving you the definition. This is the definition of neoliberalism. They don't see anything wrong with privatizing public goods and doing away with the entire concept of the public good or public utilities, privatizing all the public utilities. They don't see anything wrong with all those things because that's the paradigm that they grew up in, and it just makes economic common sense to that group of Democrats. And if that group of Democrats are leading the charge against Donald Trump, then they will be the ones to replace Donald Trump once they get rid of him. And we get rid of the craziness of Donald Trump. We might raise taxes back a little bit, but we're not going to raise taxes back to where they were. Hell, have we ever gone back to taxes being higher than when Ronald Reagan became president? But if everyone on the progressive side, and just to be sure, that was the definition of neoliberalism in the shorthand, that should be sufficient without me getting, there was actually a paragraph I want to read from one article that I think is perfect. But if we don't have progressives leading the charge, then how are you even fighting neoliberalism when you're not fighting it in the Republican Party and you're not even ready to replace it once we get rid of the Republican Party? All you're doing is reducing it down to something you claim everybody is a neoliberal. Everybody's a neoliberal to you. I'm like Waterboy. Everything's a devil to you, mama. Everything's a neoliberal to you. I mean, seriously, this is how absurd it is. When you aren't actually implementing, you're not actually going down the list. Now, if you want to say imperialist, I mean, woo, that's inclusive of almost damn near every American. If you want to talk about what's more pervasive than neoliberal economic theory is American imperialism and how people will be complicit willingly with American imperialism as a matter of policy. If you examine, I mean, come at me, examine almost any Democrat. I mean, even Bernie Sanders has very imperialistic policies. And you will note what I'm not saying, because that's an entire different conversation that I haven't even had with you guys yet. But we'll get to that. But when we're talking about domestic economic policies as they sit inside of a globalized system, there are differences between these people. There are meaningful differences for you. There are meaningful differences for you. And as neoliberal as Bill Clinton was, if you look at what Donald Trump is doing, he's making Bill Clinton look like, I mean, hell, he's making Ronald Reagan look like, closer to Keynes. I'm not a Keynesian for sure, but closer to Keynes and far, 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 far away from what his economic policies are getting ready to do. I mean, he cut the corporate tax rate down to 15%? My memory serves me correct. I'm just pulling that out the air. I guess I could Google it. The computer's right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he cut it down to 15%, which means the corporate responsibility in this country, which was negligible to begin with and was pretty much nothing for companies big enough to get around it. But now as the aggregate corporate, I mean, the sum total of corporate contribution to the society from which they derive trillions of dollars of wealth is cut drastically. And we haven't even seen the effects of it yet. Okay, what time am I at now? I don't want to just keep going on and on and on. So evaluate these candidates according to this. If Andrew Gillum got out there, which I'm afraid to say this because it's possible that he might do that this week. He may get out there and do that this week. Because he has pivoted to the center. And the center generally does represent neoliberalism. But I have not seen him yet advocate once for deregulating the banks or pulling people up by their bootstraps. That language that Obama used during his, somewhat of his, kind of used it. He was more of my brother's keeper. But then when he got in office, he was pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But I digress. If Andrew Gillum starts promoting that, if he starts talking about privatizing utilities as a way and privatizing schools as a way of solving social problems, and if he starts talking about austerity just in different language, if he starts talking about getting people off welfare and back to work, that is the language of neoliberalism. And that is a very specific set of policies which removes the government element from creating an economy that benefits demand and creates all these incentives, which is why it's not really free market. They create a mountain of incentives that are giveaways to the supply side of the equation. That is neoliberalism. And if you understand that, then you understand why you should be fighting the Republican Party tooth and nail, and why you should delineate in the Democratic Party who is actually a neoliberal and who is not. Bill Clinton is a neoliberal. Hillary Clinton is a neoliberal. Now I want to read one article from 2004 by Thomas Pally. And it gave the best, really succinct, almost in one sentence. This is in 2004. So the sentence I'm getting ready to read is in context of 1980, marking 1980, which is absolutely correct. That is the year. And this is how he defines neoliberalism. He said, for the last 25 years, economic policy and the public's thinking have been dominated by a conservative economic philosophy known as neoliberalism. The reference to liberalism reflects an intellectual lineage that connects with 19th century economic liberalism associated with Manchester, England. The Manchester system was predicated upon laissez-faire economics and was closely associated with free trade and the repeal of England's Corn Law, which restricted importation of wheat. Contemporary neoliberalism is principally associated with the Chicago School of Economics, which emphasizes the efficiency of market competition, the role of individuals in determining economic outcomes, and distortions associated with government intervention and regulation of markets. To repeat the first sentence, for the last 25 years, economic policy and the public's thinking have been dominated by a conservative economic philosophy known as neoliberalism. I don't often, maybe I do. Let me not humble brag. I know I'm a jerk. I'm a jerk until I switch and I'm like the most compassionate person that you know. Right. If you get on the good side of me, even if I don't know you, I'm by default compassionate about you, or compassionate towards you, rather, is the way to say it. But then if I get to know you and you tick me off, I'm a jerk. I am probably one of the worst people that you know, because I know how to cut to the core and insult you in ways that I should not be proud of, but it's just who I am. I said all that because I was getting ready to say that I don't brag about my education, but I'm pretty sure I do. I don't brag about the schools I went to because they were just regular state schools. But what I learned and I learned on my own through reading outside of school and just consuming all of the books, really, it's so, I mean, hell, it's how I can freestyle these conversations without a single note and do what I do. But the point of me bringing that up, besides just bragging on myself because I am an asshole, is to say this, folks, I know what the hell I'm talking about. I know what the hell I'm talking about from the perspective of academics as well as modern conversations. I understand the evolution of the term neoliberal, particularly in the last 2 years, which means more than just economic policy. It does now. That's because nobody grounded you. No one grounded the conversation to help you focus on the real meaning of neoliberalism, which is why you're in this fight in the first place. Are you not here? Are you not here to fight against the ravages of capitalism? Are you not here to fight against deregulating this banking system and giving everything away to corporate America? Are you not here to do that? Because if you're here to do that, then you have to understand the original meaning of the word neoliberalism, not as a way of being esoteric, not as a way of being a traditional, no, as a means of focusing your fight on what matters. Because if you don't understand the meaning of the word in terms of how it came to America and how it's been implemented in America, how there is a group of third way Democrats who are complicit with that implementation in America. And then now how Donald Trump has initiated a new era of an even more intense version of neoliberalism. If you don't understand that, then you're literally just throwing it around to mean Democrats that you're upset about, which is completely 100% fruitless and pointless. And I could very well just ignore this and talk about Brett Kavanaugh, because there is something very meaningful to be conversations to be had about Brett Kavanaugh. I could. There are plenty of people who are covering it, and I'm sure that in my brilliant way, I could find something unique to say about it, because I guess I'm just full of myself. However, I feel that if we don't make this correction, then we won't understand why it's important for us collectively, not just me, but all of us collectively, to be on the forefront of the resistance. Because embedded in the resistance, not all of them, and oh my God, not everyone who the resistance is, they're not all neoliberal, but the people in charge who want to get back to things as normal, they are. And if we as progressives don't understand what we're fighting for, and that what we're fighting for should put us on the forefront of resisting the Republican Party, because what they are fighting for is antithetical to what we believe, particularly in economic policy, the very reason you got so mobilized by Bernie Sanders. If we don't understand that, I'm laughing because I'm being so damn dramatic with my intonation. But if we don't understand that, then we have constrained our political participation to opposing Democrats and nothing more. Meanwhile, Republicans have taken us into an era, Donald Trump specifically have taken us into an era of neoliberalism like we have not even begun to see. So yeah, I could talk about Brett Kavanaugh and probably get 10,000 clicks, which is a lot for me, which is hilarious because people are like, Ben, you're selling out. Who's paying you, Ben? Like, fools. I literally have given up tens of thousands of clicks, hundreds of thousands of clicks in order to give you the freaking truth. I'm trying to watch my language. Freaking. That's such a dad language. I've literally sacrificed this channel in order to tell you the truth. I literally do not even care for the money because I've never been willing to exchange money for the truth. I'm laughing in between just to keep myself. I know people like it for you to lose your cool and go all Alex Jones in terms of temperament, but I'm not going to do that today. I just want to point out the irony of the one person out here telling you the truth is the one person who is not out here making the money. And yet I have the ability to influence. Right? Which is cool, which is really what I got into this for. I got into this because I wanted my words to be heard by people and acted on. My reward, notwithstanding the fact that I actually need money and need Medicare for all, notwithstanding all those things, and I'm not a martyr by any measure, but I am quite satisfied seeing the conversation and the language of entire groups of people change based on what I've said. Right? That is rewarding to me because that is why I got into this. My money was fine before I got into this. It's not fine now, but that's besides the point. The reason it's not fine now is not because of this show. I'm just letting you know what this show has really always been about. Has always been about telling the truth. And these people who are running around like the left is not telling you the truth. The social media left, the progressive Facebook and YouTube left. They are not telling you the truth, and they are distracting you from what really matters. They're distracting you from the very thing that you got into this for. They are distracting you from the fact that what you got into this for is now worse, by magnitudes of order worse. And they are doing it for money. So I don't get mad when people accuse me of changing my message for money. I just think that it's almost like when Republicans say that Democrats are trying to suppress your speech. In reality, Republicans are, thou dost protest too much. It's almost like projection. It's projection. It's projection. I got to go back and find all the profanity so I could bleep it out. But it is projection because the people you listen to, Jimmy Dore is in this for nothing but money. Okay, you want to turn up? Let's turn up. Jimmy Dore is in this game for nothing but money. He doesn't give a shit about you. He doesn't give a shit about your policies. He doesn't care that you have been devastated by this economy, because if he did, then he would point out that what Donald Trump is doing right now is going to destroy you, economically speaking. So you accuse me of doing this for money. Jimmy Dore is feeding you poison for money. Along with all these other people, these Johnny-come-lately progressives who are jumping in to fill the void. There's a couple of black voices who say, "Oh, Ben is no longer the voice of the black voice of progressivism, so I can do it." Yeah, go ahead and get the clicks, my dude. All of you, my sister, get the clicks, do it. But you're not telling them the truth. You're not telling them the truth if you can't help them to understand that what is happening in our country right now is far more devastating than anything a neoliberal Democrat has done. And yet and still, we need to replace neoliberal Democrats, because once we get back in power, we won't be able to fix everything that we need to fix, because they still have the wrong mindset with regard to how the government should interact with our economy. They will get in office and they will keep it. They will moderate the excesses, as Brandon says. But they will moderate the excesses of the economy from this starting position. In other words, they're going to moderate. They will temper what Donald Trump has done. They will soften the blow of what Donald Trump has done. But if you compare what Donald Trump has done to what Ronald Reagan did, then you will see this tempering that the Democrats who are going to get back in power, what they're going to do doesn't get us. We would have been better underneath Ronald Reagan. But because we don't really understand what we're fighting against, because everyone has dumbed it down so much, Jimmy Dore has dumbed you down so much that you think anyone you disagree with is a neoliberal, and you don't even understand that Republicans are neoliberals. I mean, hell, people. I thought maybe I'd just let it loose a little bit. Just a little bit. Because you accuse people come to my channel and say, Ben, your channel has changed. Oh, yeah. It's changed because the problem has changed. The problem right now, during the primaries, we needed to fight the way we fought for the most part. Some of you guys were ridiculous, but for the most part, we needed to fight the way that we fought. But now there is a very clear and present threat to our economic well-being. We are moving further and further towards a feudal society where everyone is a sharecropper. Everyone except a few lords. And we're moving based on a perverted version of neoliberalism. I can't say perverted because they're operating within the exact framework. So perversion is not correct, but an extreme version of neoliberalism. Oh my God. So the real people, you know who's lying to you? He's lying to you because he's not attempting to educate you, because I think he's a moron. People like Jimmy Dore. He's leading the charge in that area. So who else is there to call out? I'm trying to think who else is there to call out. There's a couple of little mini Jimmy Dores around here. But he's leading the charge, and he has millions of people who listen to his work. And now we're dealing with a left. We're dealing with a progressive left that is so uninformed that they do not understand that if they want to fight neoliberals, they got to fight Republicans first and foremost. That's enough. I'm pretty sure I'll see you tomorrow, because this feels like it's going to be a 5 podcast week. Hell, that would make it 6 podcasts because I did one yesterday. Take care, everybody.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.